Hello, my lovelies. Just to start, I am an example of what is considered balance tonight because I went on a 6-mile walk before and then I had a chippy tea. It's like northern balance, that. It's the yin and the yang. It's the harmony of living. Don't do too much health. That'll be bad for you. Don't do too much fat stuff. That'll be bad for you. Do both together and it's perfect. So I am full of a greasy chippy. Don't know why I'm sharing that with you, but I think it's a mental health thing, isn't it? Just putting out there, balance. Universe is in synchronicity now. Everything's fine. How are we all? I feel like it's a Wednesday today because I was in Lincoln last night doing my tour, and now I feel like my whole week is completely upside down. Anybody else feel like that? I know we've been in a space-time continuum situation for a period of time whilst the whole world has got into some kind of alternate reality, but this is my reality. It's very odd. So apologies if I seem discombobulated. Discombobulated. I know it. I know it. Just felt like I had marbles in my mouth when I was saying it. Peter's getting involved again. He doesn't know his place these days, guys. Got himself all in there because of YouTube and because he chats to you sometimes on things like Patreon, and now that's it, I've lost him. He'll be here next week in a wig, dressed in my clothes, ill-fitting. Let me tell you, he doesn't fit into my clothes. I do fit into his though. Also, got loads of questions in tonight, but as I always wanted to say, because I want to make sure that I attend as well as people who are achieving live presence with me by being on Facebook and all the other channels, please do just write your questions in if there's something that's burning you and you want to just ask, or if there are any issues that are coming up. I do obviously want to answer the other questions, but I give priority to people who are here just because it means that you'll actually get some kind of answer. And yeah, let's get going. By the way, hiya everyone, hiya. I can see you all at the side. I can only see the people on Facebook, by the way, so hi everybody, but you're all on other channels and that's great as well. Hiya Emma, I have CPTSD. To those of you who don't know what CPTSD is, it's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And some of you might ask, well, what is the C? So when we think about post-traumatic stress disorder, we imagine that it relates usually to an individual scenario such as a bomb going off and you're involved, or a car crash and you're involved. With CPTSD, we don't have the level of origin that we would expect with PTSD. This is very, very, very like minimally explained, but just to give you an idea. So CPTSD means that there have been more occasions, more incidences, which obviously complexifies it when you come to do things like trauma work with an individual, because it isn't quite, neither are simple to deal with, but it isn't quite as easy to, for example, use things like EMDR, which would help reduce the trauma because you're dealing with lots of different circumstances. Just to put that out there for those of you who don't know, or for those of you who have PTSD and are now thinking, oh, wait a minute, there were more incidences and therefore maybe I fit that categorization. I've never trusted anyone enough to discuss blame before, as I always completely blame myself. I allowed myself to go into therapy recently, and now my head feels so full of questions and self-hatred, and I'm feeling weak and vulnerable, which I hate. Any advice on how to manage this better, please? Thanks for all you do. It's a pleasure. So I'm going to deconstruct that a little bit. First off, really glad that you've gone to therapy. I think that it's a really great choice when you're dealing with something so complex. And I don't think CPTSD is easy to navigate and negotiate by yourself, because it's one of those things that has happened to you and you've internalized and you're reacting to, right? And your brain and your body is on super protective mode. It's on high alert, and it wants to make sure that you never entertain any kind of trauma like you've experienced again. So it means that it has all these really sensitive triggers, and that can often mean that you end up in scenarios where you panic or you hyperventilate or you have horrible nightmares because you're exposing yourself to certain circumstances that have an immediate reflection. Only a tiny one is required, and boom, we're right back where we were, right? So this is where that kind of experience and episode arrives from. So first of all, understand that there's nothing unusual about those feelings when you've been through trauma. Your body and your brain is trying to really protect you, but it's on steroids. It's as simple as that. And, you know, I'm not being sarcastic, I'm just saying it genuinely. Imagine taking steroids and then bodybuilding, you're gonna get a lot bigger, right? It's the same when it comes down to CPTSD. So you're dealing with that on a daily basis. However, put that to the side, you then go into therapy, and then you start bringing it to life. So you give it your story. You start expressing it, exploring it. Now, I think one of the problems that we've got here, even though you say you blame yourself, I can hear in your question and in what you're saying that you know you shouldn't, right? So you say, I allowed myself to go into therapy recently and now my head feels so full of questions and self-hatred and feeling weak and vulnerable, which I hate. And you also say, I've never trusted anyone to discuss the blame before, as I always completely blame myself. So, one of the problems that we've got is you've probably gone in and talked about the story, this is what happened, without talking about the reality of, I blame me. Because very often people think that if we have that conversation with somebody, if we say, look, this is all my fault, and believe me, I am the first person who thinks that taking responsibility for what you have done and what you've experienced that is your fault, that's actually really important. But with CPTSD, it's not going to be your fault. So the difference and distinction between CPTSD and taking responsibility for something that is your fault is that when you take something that is your fault and you make yourself responsible for it, it feels really good. Yeah, it's hard, it's challenging because you've got to work through it. And it's painful because you're like, yeah, this was on me. But it's good, it fits it. So it's the first resolve that is required to move through it and process it and move on. When you've got CPTSD and you're blaming yourself, you're getting nowhere because your brain's like, well, I can take responsibility for all of this and make this my fault and then I've got some level of control. But your emotions going, yeah, that isn't the way that it happened. So you've got what we would call cognitive dissonance. You're trying to hold two conflicting beliefs in the same moment. It isn't possible. It leads to chaos within you, and it means that essentially you're not going to get the progress you want. But imagine part of you never wanting to go through what you've gone through ever again. What's the easiest way from your experience of living as a human being to manage that? Well, okay, if I never allow myself to trust anyone else, if I always believe that every action has a reaction and therefore I am in charge of it, then I can protect myself from any further harm and chaos. But it's not working because, first of all, life is full of a series of micro-trust experiences, from getting up in the morning and making your cup of tea and hoping that you're not going to get electrocuted by your kettle, to walking across the road and not getting hit by a car. It's all micro-trust, so our world is built on that. And you're trying to apply this distrust because of your horrible experiences that were not your fault into a world where you require trust. And when you went into therapy, because you, one level, want to go, it's all my fault, I caused it, I was in this situation, I returned to this situation, and so on and so forth. That might be the dialogue and narrative going through your head. Because you haven't necessarily voiced that for fear that you'll contaminate the therapy and make the individual believe that you are deserving of that, thus fulfilling a fear cycle that as much as you want to take responsibility for this, you really want somebody to say it's not your fault, which is the right thing. So you just kind of mute that point and talk around stuff. Therapy is about being fully authentic. It's about knowing that even though you may say things that you feel incriminate or that make you seem like you're in a bad light, your practitioner knows this stuff. This is what we are trained for. Not everyone uses unconditional positive regard. It's part of therapy. We're meant to unconditionally positively regard people in therapy. Now, I don't think I always do that either. I don't think it's very good to unconditionally positively regard somebody's behavior if it's really bad. I'm going to help them figure that forward, right? But for the most part, what we see with our clients are people with great hope, and it's a privilege to be with them on a journey. And we want that stuff. We want you to tell us that story. We want you to explore it. And the fact that you went into therapy and then you've come out with loads of questions, that's good. That's a great thing, because having lots of questions means that you're seeking answers. And feeling afraid to trust is not what you're being taught. You're being taught, well, that means you have to have the courage to trust. And so you don't feel like you're out of the gates yet. You still feel stuck in the stable, so to speak, because you know what needs to be said, but you're afraid of the consequences of that. My argument here is you can't know the beauty of those consequences, which are primarily going to be good, unless you take the risk in trusting your practitioner. And like I said, the big one with CPTSD is explore the fact that there's a very, very strong rationale in our brains that says, if I blame myself, I can control my future outcomes. Because as long as I know that I was completely responsible, well, I can prevent myself from being responsible again. Again, that's a bad way of forming a belief system, because life is about a series of opportunities, and sometimes they go wrong, and that's okay, because that's about our experience of living and learning. We had a literal conversation with my youngest son at dinner before. I say dinner, I obviously mean a chippy. It sounds like I cooked it. I didn't. But one of the things that came up is we've had a really serious tragedy in our life. Obviously, you guys know that my father died in very tragic circumstances, and it's really wounded him. It's wounded his trust in the world. And I'm constantly having to have conversations with him about his own PTSD and how wanting to not trust is akin to wanting to be unhappy for the rest of your life. And that may be hard to hear, because people are like, I don't want to be unhappy for the rest of my life. I'm doing this to protect myself from being unhappy. And it's like, no. If you choose not to trust yourself and others, then you choose a really less than perfect life. And life is already problematic enough. We all are going to go through a lot of pain. But if you don't allow yourself to believe that there are possibilities of that synchronicity with other human beings and accept that sometimes they'll fall short, then you don't have the wide experience of that kaleidoscopic connection on every different level with all different people, some of which will inspire you and grow you and thrill you, and some which will just really let you down. But as I said, pull back to the self-hate is not self-hate. That's why it hurts. It's not in synchronicity with you. You hate the feeling. That means that you're not going to feel a feeling. That's what has to leave you. It's not what has to remain. You don't want to trust people, but you know ultimately that you went to therapy because you want to. So again, there is this real survivor in you. Listen to it. And the most important thing is break down that belief system of, I don't want to trust anyone again. Because all we do is trust. And yeah, it hurts really badly sometimes, but that's okay. Because again, we're refining, redefining, and building resilience in those experiences. Sorry, I went on a bit there, but it's a big one and I wanted to pay attention to it. And also I think it's really resonant of a lot of people who join these particular lives. A lot of us are dealing with those kind of PTSD, CPTSD issues. What are your top tips for picking yourself up after setbacks or relapses in recovery from depression? Wouldn't it be wonderful if depression was just a linear road to hope and completely overcoming those experiences? Because I think we have got lost. Now, this is a really philosophical experience, and I suppose the last 18 months for me has changed me. I mean, it had changed me anyway because of my father's death, and I woke up a different human being, and I don't think that's something that many of us won't be able to relate to when we have significant losses in our lives. But then there has been another change in me, and I blindly trusted and blindly respected people that I felt knew more than me. It's something that I think is really pumped into us from day one. You know, trust your teacher more, they know more than you. Trust your parents more, they know more than you. And sometimes it's true. But then I've realised in the past 18 months that maybe I trusted people who I thought knew more than me far too much. And even in the weight of evidence and data, they stand true to mythical belief systems that are evidentially wrong. And it's helped me because it's made me question my training, and it's made me question my understanding of what we need to hear in certain circumstances, including myself. So depression. First off, I've always said on this particular platform that there are only a certain amount of depressions that antidepressants can treat. And I say that because I think that I've worked with too many people who have felt really bad about the fact that they haven't recovered from depression when they've had antidepressants. They think that there is something wrong intrinsically with them. You know, this didn't work, therefore all is lost. So you might be on antidepressants and they might have had a certain amount of impact and they might have been good. And if that's the case, that's amazing. It is, because for some people, they are incredible. They, really can make a difference. But for those who do not benefit from antidepressants, and there are many, then it's more about doing, I suppose, a multidimensional exploration of your life. And I've been learning about this more and revisiting things more and listening to people more who are far more academic, far more intelligent, far more incredible than I will ever be in my life. But it's really helpful and healthy for me to do that, because it reminds me of things that as we get older, we get into our little habits with work and we all think we know what we're doing, don't we? And I think that's a really bad place for us to be. And I think that the last 18 months has helped to shake me up and make me go, you know nothing. And unlike all of these people online who tell you that they know everything and this is the way, I know nothing. Because if you think about the amount of knowledge I have in my world in this moment, and then you think about the libraries out there, and the books I'll never read, and history I'll never know, and psychological debate that I'll never entertain, how can I know and be an expert? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And people who hold on to that, I think they need to work on what makes them good at what they do, because I think if you're not ever evolving, then maybe you are static, and if you're static, then you don't grow, and if you don't grow, you don't develop, and so on and so forth. So bringing it back to this particular issue with depression, first of all, you need to multidisciplinarily and multifunctionally explore your life. And what is it that is lacking? I think all of us can do this more. And me and my husband have been talking about this because we've been walking a lot recently. And part of the walking is for health reasons. You know, I was realizing I was doing like 1,000 steps, sometimes less a day, because it's so sedentary just working from home. And I was like, we need to kind of really up this. We need to kind of get ourselves out. We need to think about what kind of an impact we can have on our bodies. And walking has done one of two things. Firstly, it's reminded me that when I get out with nature, and I do long walks, I feel completely at peace because I'm doing what my body is destined for. So I would look at what your exercise level is. I don't think you need to go and do something crazy like get in the gym and do 1,000,000 kettlebell swings, although fine if you want to. I don't think you have to go run a marathon. I think you can literally just walk. And I think it's underestimated and undervalued walking, but it's really good. So apart from it getting you out with nature and allowing you to feel like your body's doing what it's meant to do, the second thing that it does is it gives you space and time to process. And I think that that's one of the things that we're losing sight of, space and time to process, where you just get to be animated without a need to be doing anything but the action of walking. And then you can explore the thoughts that are coming to you. So that's one thing I'd explore. Secondly, what are the things that are depressing you? Now, again, there are some people who have a great life and everything is perfect in their life as far as they're concerned, but the one thing that they have is depression. Arguably, that is challenging, because if you think everything's perfect in your life, but you still feel depressed, you maybe feel like, well, what on earth am I doing that means that this is the way I feel? And how am I ever going to change and challenge this to a point where I move through it? And like I said, that's sometimes where things like antidepressants can be helpful. But even if you're in that situation and they're not helpful, then you can still ask yourself a range of questions, can't you? Like, first of all, I was exploring this in some podcasts the other day, listening to them, not involved in them. And it was talking about one of the issues with saying, find your meaning in life, because it almost suggests that we have to have this idea of what meaning is. And I think where depression is concerned, that's one of the things that we search for. It's like, what is my meaning? What am I meant to be doing to find my meaning, right? So there's almost this detective work required to solidify and acknowledge and then achieve this aim of meaning. And maybe that isn't how we should see it. Maybe what we should think about is like, what if I have some responsibility in this world? And what if that responsibility feeds into me feeling better about who I am? And I have found that another strand to helping with depression, or in my case, anxiety, I suppose in my case, grief, is to really think about how I can be responsible to others. Part of the reason I do this, part of the reason tomorrow night I'll be going and running group work locally to me, because it makes me feel like I'm having this impact on the world where I have meaning, but it's not that I'm seeking meaning, it's that it's a byproduct of what I'm acting out, what I'm doing. So explore that. What is it that makes you do to the world what can reflect your worth? And if it isn't there, that's something you need to explore too. Thirdly, remember, if you've started to feel lifts from your depression, you are going to have this incredibly sensitive connection when you feel even the slightest drop. I think that when you get to a position of healing, it's the most treacherous journey, that part, because it feels great to not be depressed. And it feels like wow, this is life, this is living, this feels great. And then you wake up and you have that dread in your stomach and you have that crushing feeling on your chest and you suddenly feel like, oh my God, it's back. But what will have happened is your brain and your emotions will be so symbiotic in the recognition that this feeling feels lower than before, as in the day that you were feeling good to the day that you're feeling less than good, that it's caught you quickly. And that's your activator for action. Okay, how do I work my plan? What are the things that I've done in the past A, B, and C time that have actually made a difference to this feeling? Is it that I need to go and bake a cake? Is it that I need to call a friend? Is it that I need to go and do some headspace or do a meditation stream? Is it that I need to just get my arse out of the door and walk? Whatever it is, you can answer that feeling. And then the other thing that I'd explore is to genuinely sit down and say to yourself, what are my aims? What am I aiming to do? Again, I think that questions come a lot of the time because they also reflect where I am. I think the universe does that. And me and my husband have been talking a lot about aims. And the fact that very often it's in your weakest and darkest of moments that you're really being taught your strongest foundation. And I can look back in the last 18 months and think to myself, you know, there have been some bleak times. I mean, there was unbelievably bleak times when I lost my dad, and they are still bleak times because I miss him dearly and I always will. But there have been bleak times in the past 18 months because of my views, because I don't necessarily believe everybody else, and I won't be told what to do and what to think because I'm an individual with autonomous thought, and it's just the way I am. And I've gone through the peaks and the troughs, and I've accepted the consequences with good grace. But what it also taught me is when somebody shines a light on the instability and insecurity of your foundations. So like in my example, if something can be taken away from you, all your good work within 24 hours, because let's say you did a tweet that somebody doesn't like because it was ironic, is that a bad thing to learn? Now, at first glance, you could say that's a really bad thing to learn. That must be really painful and scary. You may sit there and feel great fear and all that would be right. But is it a good lesson to learn? Absolutely it is. The lesson is I need more stability and more security. And even though there were mythical elements of security, you know, my dad died, that wasn't secure. The point is you can create better foundations. And I think with depression, often what this lesson is this constant need to motivate, these aims. What is it that I truly, truly believe I desire? You might not get exactly what you desire, but in creating those aims, you may get something that really inspires you. It's the journey, not the destination. That's the cliche, but I get it. You know, it's the journey, not the destination. So you may set your ideas and ideals on one aim, and you may go for that aim, and then it may shift and shape and it may become something different, but the aim is good to start with. So I think with depression, that's a big part of it as well. And then finally, I would say, don't lose sight of that progress. The depression that you're feeling now, the relapse, it's called a relapse because you've been there before and you got out of it. So in therapy, there's this poem. I don't remember it. And it's not a poem like some kind of amazing epiphanical kind of poem that people would say. But it's a really simple one. And I think I was in like my second year of training. So it was a very long time ago. And all it said was, I see a hole. I walk, I fall into the hole. I see a hole. I walk to the hole. I know the hole is there and I still fall in it. I walk to the hole. I see the hole. I know that I'm going to fall in it, but I seek to remove myself. And then the final one is, I see a hole. I know I can fall into the hole. I choose to walk around it. It's not profound, but it's the kind of model of, I suppose, unconscious incompetence to conscious competence, where you kind of go from, I am helpless, I don't know what to do, I'm just in this hole, to I'm going to be in that hole again, I've seen it, to I'm in the hole, but I kind of figure out that there's a way that I can get out. And then the last one is that I can just walk past it. I think depression's like that. And, you know, right now you're in the hole, you know, but you've got out before. So don't lose sight of that. And like I said, institute all of those explorations of every part of your life. What is it that is lacking? Because very often, fundamentally, there is something lacking. And you can meet that need. You really can. Depression is there to teach you what you need to change, not to teach you how to be held within it. And like I said, finally, if you haven't been on antidepressants and you do feel that that's something you'd like to consider, then that's a great thing to do. Same as going and seeing your GP and just saying, get me on that waiting list for therapy. I know it's like 100 years long, but it's worth it. And when people tell you that therapy lists are like years long, and that's what they're doing at the moment, remember, there is a vast amount of people who don't go to therapy. They get on the list and they never turn up. So it much quicker becomes a list that's completely acceptable for you. So think about that as well. Hi, Emma. How do I stop myself disassociating when I'm extremely unwell? Can you do me a favour if you're listening to this now? Can you just let me know whether you're talking about psychologically unwell, like if you're dealing with a particular mental health issue, or are we talking physically unwell? Just so kind of I get my head around that. How do I break the negative cycle of fighting school when it does to my daughter's mental health? It's been a battle after battle which is affecting my everyday life. How do I break the negative cycle of fighting school when it does to my daughter's mental health? Okay, so I'm going to assume that you're fighting school because it's affecting your child's mental health, right? And that is a battle. Of course it's a battle. You're a parent, you're a loving parent. Your happiness is inextricably linked to your child's. That makes you a really good human being. The problem is, it also means that you can't separate strategy from what is essentially required to create the movement that you want so that you get what you need. What do you want is the question. So what is the aim of dealing with school? Because if the aim of dealing with school is to make it a super fair place where everyone's kind and where your daughter is a priority and where her needs are met fully, it's not going to happen. I say that because there is no point me sitting here and lying. Your daughter will not be a priority. They've got hundreds of kids. Her mental health will not be at the forefront of their attention and care. They've got other kids like that. There won't be a kind and nice experience for kids always because there are bullies, and there are also narky kids who just make life difficult. And also if you additionalise that your daughter might have a sensitive temperament, then you cannot change the system to accommodate the needs of your child. You can change the way that your child interacts with that system, and you can change the way that your child has access to the system. That's different. So when my youngest son was struggling, I took him out of school and he was home educated. And that was it. He wasn't going back with masks and testing. It was as simple as that. It was massively triggering for him, anything medical is. So I could have put him in that, and I could have let him deal with the consequences of that, and I could have expected the teachers to be more sympathetic to that, but I couldn't have changed the system to accommodate him in the way that I felt his mental health required it. So you have to ask yourself those questions, because there's two conflicting issues. That is, your daughter is your primary priority. You adore her. Her mental health is absolutely correctly the most important thing right now. And it is, there's no doubt. I'm not denying that. You're right. Her mental health is absolutely the most important thing. Her happiness is. But we're talking about a system with hundreds of kids, teachers, all with their own lives, all with their own stories, all with their own problems, all with a multitude of reactions required for many students with issues, and in an unforgiving circumstance because of the fact that there are lots of children around who may not have the same values and worldview that she requires to feel good. So then it comes down to, as I said, pull it back. What is your strategy? What does your daughter want? That's number one. Sit down with her and actually explore, what is it that you want? Like, can I even meet those needs? That's what you need to explore. So before we think about real strategy as far as kids, or whether you can actually think about a different way of educating her, what is it that she sees as a priority list for her finding school more accommodating or acceptable? Because if she says to you, I need everyone to be nice to me, I need these teachers to not have a go at me when, I need to be allowed to do A, B, and C, and it's actually a picture of fantasy, then nothing you do is ever going to meet her needs in school. So the first thing I'd say, and again, come back to me on this, is sit down with her and ask her specifically what she sees as the needing changes to affect her happiness in school. Because before we think about a plan, we have to know if it's realistic. If it's not realistic, it's not a plan. It's just a fantasy. It's a wish list, and it's not going to happen. But if we bring it back to what is the reality and how can we accommodate the reality, then there's a possibility, right? And you don't need to be fighting the system constantly either, because you should have a clear strategy, which means that the system is aware of that, they've agreed it, and then if it doesn't happen, you have a chance of recourse. Then they have a problem. They've agreed it, they've substantiated your claim, they've acknowledged what needs to occur, they've said it will be implemented, and they failed to do that. Their problem. Now you have a reason to go, and you're not fighting, you're giving them accountability, which they have chosen to agree with. But if you're going and saying, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, and to them it's like, well, you may as well just ask for a Euro Millions win because it ain't happening, that's a problem. So sit down with her and come back to this, and we can strategically explore it in the next session. But look at what she really wants. And then let's look at whether that can function effectively in a school organisation. Because I don't want to be like, we can just do this, it's all going to be easy. There may need to be systemic changes in your experience with her and where she is educated and how she's educated. And that's all okay. None of that is bad that I've just said, because all of that is better than just doing the same thing again and again and again and again and feeling frustrated as hell, and her feeling was unhappy as hell and was getting nowhere. So just explore it that way. And everybody should do that if you're in a situation where you've got to explore change. It has to be, is this realistic and how do we achieve it? Did the person come back about how to disassociate at all? No. I feel totally numb, bored and depressed today for no reason. And you make me feel better about stuff. I love that. Listen, we all feel numb, bored and depressed sometimes. That's not to minimise your feelings. It's not to minimise them. I'm saying that I don't think we just have those honest conversations, do we? I mean, literally, there have been days that most people would take and shove in a little box and set fire to it, because life is difficult. Again, me and Pete have been kind of talking about needing to read more and needing to kind of think more about different perspectives and philosophies, and we're not bright people. It's not like we're sitting here going, oh, we're going to get another one of those several encyclopedias of philosophy and certain mules about them and have people round for wine and sit and be academic. That's not us. We're like, we'll have to play the audiobook 4 times just to remember that it can sink in. But one of the reasons that we're doing that is because, again, we've recognised that, you know, that feeling of being depressed and numb and sometimes really alone is just a part of the human condition, and that we don't talk about that a lot. Like, we were talking about the fact that we've been listening to somebody who talks about the immeasurable suffering of being human, but that's not enough to just give up. I always say on here, life is a journey of loss. Let's undertake to do it joyfully. It doesn't mean that there isn't incredible pain. It doesn't mean there isn't incredible sadness. It doesn't mean that we don't have moments of really great challenge and even decisions that are enormous about what we would like to do instead of carrying on. These are all part of who we are. It's all part of what makes us beautifully human. It's the rich fabric of love and loss and everything in between. But I think that when we feel depressed and numb and lonely and low, we're being taught the opposite. We're being taught motivation, we're being taught connection, we're being taught hope, stuff of hope, SOH. We say that in therapy, the SOH. And that doesn't mean that everything I said about suffering isn't going to be part of our experience. It is. But for me, knowing that every opportunity that we apply ourselves to has something to give us means that one of the things that is lacking is that we don't often seek that much opportunity. Somebody the other day was talking and they said, imagine what it would be like to be your very best self. And it really spoke to me, because I was like, we're just brought up with this humility in our environment and this humbleness. And, you know, we have people stamp on us. I mean, come on, if the last 18 months has told me many things, one, it's taught me my conscience is right. And it doesn't matter whether anybody else has a conscience like mine. My conscience is right. And somebody was describing the other day when I was listening to a particular individual speaking, and they said that if you want to know whether you have conscience and the impact of that, do something that your conscience tells you not to do. And we've all done it. The things that I have done that I knew were wrong, they haunt me. Even now, I knew they were wrong when I did them. But they haunt me now. And it's because my conscience was there to educate me and reinforce me and tell me what to do. And somehow our society tells us that we're not going to listen to it sometimes. I look at how people have tried to control even me in the past 18 months. Tried to control what I think, what I say, what my opinions are, whether I'm right or wrong. No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to control my thoughts, my feelings, my words. They're mine. I can accept the consequences of what happens if I say it or speak it or think it in a way that gets out there. I'll control that myself by managing it myself and learning from it myself, but you don't get to have power over me. And I think that a lot of us are at that point where we felt quite flattened and our expression has been flattened. And you know what I think about as well? I think about all the incredibly bright human beings out there who don't have any qualifications, who are brilliantly talented, fantastically creative, unbelievably sharp, unbelievably able to explore and explain and learn and grow in so many ways. And they're not even allowed an opinion because they haven't gotten letters after their names. How ridiculous. How ridiculous is it that we've got to this point? So I think that a lot of people feel numb and depressed and alone and low because people aren't living their true potential because they're afraid that other people don't think it's acceptable. So again, think about those things when you're thinking about the mental health landscape, because often it comes down to those elements, you know. We're not being true to ourselves. We're not listening to our conscience because we're really bloody scared that somebody's going to tell us off. And the best advice I have for you is they will. And you know what? That's on them and you don't have to listen. And if you just think that way more, I think it's an incredible way to start thriving, even ultimately when we've had incredibly painful experiences, which we all know I have as well as you have. Leanne, you're looking forward to us meeting at the big group tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it as well. It's our first actual live one where I'm with you. I expect there to be lots of biscuits and lots of cups of tea, because even though I don't drink coffee anymore, I may treat myself to a cup of tea, but I'll see you tomorrow. Hi Emma, I've been really let down by the NHS and 4 years later, I'm still waiting for a referral with secondary care. It seems like no one takes it seriously other than threaten suicide. What else can I do? I mean, that isn't you that's the problem, you know? I mean, I'm not saying that glibly. That isn't you that's the problem. You're going, what can I do? I threaten suicide. It's the only time I get a reaction. Well, that's a terrible system. That's not you. Your problems aren't minimized. Your problems don't disappear. Your problems aren't not problematic enough. That's the system that's not working. So you can internalize that and go, God, what do I need to do to get the help that I need? They keep promising me and it's not happening. And I suppose the easiest way to answer that is because the system doesn't work. So your needs aren't getting the volume, because unfortunately, if they were just about going and threatening suicide, people wouldn't die, because people threaten suicide and then go through with it and the system still didn't pick them up. So we already know ultimately that's not the benchmark of do I matter or are my needs important, because you're going to get a no, because people literally turn up and get promised help and then kill themselves, sometimes in some places, in some trusts. We know that. We hear about it all the time. So if that's your benchmark, if you're looking at them to meet your needs in a way that's going to make it better, and acknowledge that the only way you're going to get that house is if you keep threatening suicide or attempting suicide, then there were people who've done that and succeeded. And we don't want that, because ultimately that definitely doesn't meet your needs and definitely doesn't mean that the system effectively works for you in any way, shape or form, right? So I guess we have to bring it back to what is it that you are looking for? What are the needs that you need to meet? And part of that might be, well, therapeutic is what I require. I want to see somebody regularly for therapy, and I want to see them because I feel that in therapy I'm going to get held in a way that I've not been held elsewhere emotionally. And that's probably a really good decision to make, and it's also probably got some real weight and worth, because that may be an effective route. But it doesn't discount the fact that there are other options around you. And that's one of the things that I think we all need to think more of. If something isn't working, we're not getting something, we shouldn't just then put all, to say a cliche, our eggs in one basket. We shouldn't focus on this will be okay when. If we focus on this will be okay when, it's all about giving power away to something that firstly hasn't occurred and secondly might not work. Because lots of us do things that we think are going to be okay and they don't work out for us. I started playing the piano. Turns out I'm really shit. You know what I mean? Didn't work out for me. It was great thinking about it. Thought I'd be amazing. Same with the guitar, if I'm honest. But even though that is obviously a tiny example of what I'm projecting onto you, I'm saying, what else can you do in the meantime? And so arguably, if you've not got that secondary care right now and it's not happening for you, what other options are there? So there are things like SOS, which is a charity I'm an ambassador for. You can ring them on an evening, have a conversation with somebody if you're struggling. It's not therapy, it's a chat, it's a conversation, but it's somebody at the end of the phone and it means that you're being valued and heard. Secondly, what forums can you join? Who reflects the same kind of issue as you? Which mental health area are you dealing with and who can you connect with who understands that experience, like-minded people, people who've been there and struggled? What tips have they got? Self-help, there's lots of it available. You can go online and you can learn about mental health issues because you know what? When you understand a mental health issue more, you grow, you figure things out, you hear things that are important. Podcasts, not something I ever thought about, but recently I've been listening to podcasts and they can go on for like 2.5 hours. That's good because you get to think and feel and experience somebody else's world in a way that relates to you and that you can pick up strategies and tips from. And you can do that online pretty much for free everywhere. So look at people who've been through the same. The stories matter. Self-help books, the stories matter. People have been there, they've experienced it. Pick them up, read them voraciously, keep reading them. Plan. What is it that you want to change? Why do you want to change it? What's going to happen once you've changed it? What's the aim? Explore it, set those goals, make them tangible, make them realistic, start working on them. Who is in your circle of trust? Have you got anybody? If not, you want to create one. And that means doing some work. It means connecting with people. It means going out and meeting them. It means making yourself vulnerable. It's all those things. Exercise, do you do it? If not, start. And I say that because it will have a good impact. It will be a better impact than a lot of things you've ever done before. These things make a massive difference. Look at what you eat. What you put in your body says what you're worth about your body. If you're putting crap in your body, you're going to feel crap. Change it. Because these are all things that are within your power. These are all things that are within your control. And when you do that, ultimately, it may not answer all those issues, but it'll make everything that you're dealing with now easier. Isn't that the key? Isn't that the key that we have to think about ourselves? We can't unlock the final lock because that's somebody else's with power. That's the secondary care unit's power. But you can do all the rest. And doing all the rest, you're going to be in a much better shape than you were. And then when you arrive there, you'll still be in a much better shape than you were. That's so integral to change and it's so integral to motivation. And it takes work and it's hard, but it's worth it. If you're drinking too much, taking recreational drugs, doing any of the things that you know doesn't inspire, educate, change for the better, get them out. It's all within your control, that. And like I said, don't feel that this failing in circumstance around treatment is your problem. It's not. You're doing the right things, ask him. Finally, another thing that's always kind of handy is just speak to your local MP. You know, speak to them. Be like, I waited 4 years for this secondary care. I need it. Get them on side. Complain to the primary care trust. Complain to your GPs as well. Write and say, I'm going to complain to the General Medical Council or whoever it is that you've been referred to. Say you're going to put in a complaint. Speak to pals. Do that. Be strategic, be proactive. But know that you can do a lot in between that to attain and achieve a better state of mind. Genuinely. My wife and I have different parenting techniques. Is yours right? Sorry. Being sarcastic there. But you know what I mean. My wife and I, because I'm right when I do parenting, I'm compassionate parenting. So I only do compassionate parenting. Whereas my partner, lovely as he is, would not be as compassionate. But he isn't allowed to be discompassionate because I'm discompassionate to him when he tries to not be compassionate. So he's just learned to just let me be. My wife and I have different parenting techniques. So when she yells at our son, 5 years old, I feel like I'm 5 years old again, getting yelled at by my own mum, and I have a very physical reaction to it. Is this normal? You're just like me. So we can do the Freudian, Jungian, we can do all of the, therapeutic angles about why you're triggered and why you're back as a 5-year-old. We can do that, but you know that. Like, when do you get shouted at in life? It's a ridiculous technique, and no disrespect, guys. I'm not judging you if you do this. I'm not judging you. I've got very good friends. My sister is a screamer. She's not anymore because they're older, but wow, she scared me. And I am like so peaceful with my children. Like, I can't do it because if you shout at me, I can't hear anything. And my brain is going, punch them in the face. Or, I can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. Or, why is this person shouting at me? Like, literally, there is no, oh, they're angry. I need to listen to what they're saying. Maybe they're educating me. It's like, that's kind of what happens. If you are a sensitive, empathetic, compassionate human, and you watch an adult, a grown-ass adult, screaming at a little 5-year-old child, it is an unequal transaction. It's a ridiculous one as well. What's the 5-year-old going to do? They're 5. The 5-year-old does not learn how to behave through being screamed at. They just learn to be scared. And if you're having a visceral and cerebral experience and reaction because you're quite scared too, that's because you feel how that child is feeling. You remember what it was like to be that child. That's a really strong connection. And it's a really good connection because you're like, ugh, this did not feel good for me. I'm still pretty traumatized. And I have somebody relate to this situation and circumstance in a similar way that they experienced, when I was growing up with my mother. That's powerful. So hear it, listen to it, speak to your wife. Say, you know what? I feel really scared when you scream at our child. I know you're not doing this to be nasty. I know you're doing this to educate, to sanction, to stop. I get it. But let me tell you, it scares me to death. And I'm thinking, I don't want our child to feel this level of fear about his mother because, you're meant to be this loving, compassionate soul that they trust and that they can come to in any circumstances. Because believe me, what you are setting up with your child as a child is what you are setting up for their future with you. How can you be a safe place and a safe space for a child if they fear this kind of aggression and hostility, albeit it comes from a place of goodness, not judging your wife? But how can a child know that that's a safe place if you get screamed at? Like my own children, I'm really proud of my parenting, but I still know that even though my children have never really ever had a bad reaction, there's probably been one bad reaction in my whole life to my child and my eldest child, and it was bad what he had done, and it was compromised things, and it was bad, and I was angry for a second, and then I was like, this is okay, this is one of those things. But apart from that, my entire parenting has been peaceful, and still my children have been afraid to come and tell me that they've got in trouble or done something wrong or broken something right, because the natural experience of anybody is, oh God, we learn quickly our boundaries, right? And it's almost instinctual, it's almost primal in us. When we do something wrong, we know. So that's a big stretch, going and seeing a parent and saying, hey, I did something wrong. But as long as that parent's never screamed at that child, never hit that child, then maybe the child will make a decision to come and say to you, you know what? I think I fucked up. I think I screwed up. So as a child in their primary years, that's the lesson we're trying to teach them. I am your safe place, your safe space. Come say to me what you need to say. Know that I will always love you. Know that I will always care for you. Know that I will always protect you. Know that you can tell me, even when it's really bad, and I will still love you and be safe. So I think you are a great parent for having that initial feelings of this isn't working. Tell your wife how it makes you feel. Tell her that you're not judging her. You're not. But tell her, listen, this is not going to work. It's not going to be a viable plan for us. And even though you're mum, and I know that mums kind of take precedence over a lot of that stuff, I think we can work this out together. It's not about you judging her. It's about you saying, look, I feel this way. Like, if I feel this way, how's it going to feel for that 5-year-old, that little kid? They're trying to just live in this world, and it's confusing and it's scary. So like, help her sit down and be like, okay, why don't we just think about what it was like to be a child? and how scary it was to be a kid when people were screaming at you. And do we really want to translate those feelings to our children? Because the problem is parents aren't thinking that way. You're just thinking, this is a problem, I've got to solve it. You're not in that world anymore, you've left that world, but go back to it. Remember what it's like. You're just more connected to that inner child, and it's a great thing. Son's really lucky, because he could equally have another parent who completely agrees with that kind of, shall we say, more totalitarian parenting, which again, lots of people do, not judging. I'm just saying I think it's a better way, is what I've just talked about. Hi Emma, I tried to kill myself last year. I'm under a mental health team, but I'm still finding it really hard with dark thoughts. Is there any way to stop these thoughts? First of all, I'm really glad that you didn't manage to take your life last year, because the fact that you are here this year demonstrates that if you just don't do it, if you go through that and then just don't do it, you end up here. And that is not a perfect science, okay? You still have dark thoughts, but you're here. And that says something pretty powerful. And when you're in that space with those dark thoughts, often it's because you're not thinking about the counter, the actual alter to that. What is it that actually I dare to dream? And I say that because I think, again, a lot of us have been kind of molded through our lives into these positions and places where we don't really think there's a lot of hope. And as I said earlier on, life is full of suffering, and we all agree with that. And there are tragedies and there are awful things that happen to us. And the fact is, we need to be able to hold that knowledge without it sinking us. And we need to hold that knowledge and still think, well, okay, what are the other options that give this life a sense of joy at times, a sense of contentment, a sense of peace, or even learn from the things that are harming us and hurting us and educating us, because this is pain, and pain is potent. Like, I don't think we talk about that enough. I don't think we talk about enough that really it's in the worst times that we learn the most. And it's not that we enjoy them, but maybe part of becoming a grown human being in this journey and on this journey is to accept that the good times are amazing because they're good, but they're not really rich with that much content apart from let's stay here, which is great. But the bad times, they like shake your foundations, and they cause you to question everything about who you are and everything that you know. And it's overwhelming. And when you're being overwhelmed, one of the most obvious strategies is, I just don't want to be here. Certainly after my father, I didn't want to be here. And it was a very real feeling. It wasn't a feeling as if I was just like, oh, I don't want to be here. That would be something I might think about, and just a fleeting thought. It was an intense, please give me a Dignitas barbiturate drink and let me be done with this. And it was a very, very real feeling. And I remember knowing that I had to find my anchors and foundations, that was how I could still be here today. And just to trust that if I could just create my anchors, no matter how heavy my burden, if I could just create some anchors, that would be what I needed, so that I just could wake up the next day and know I felt all that, and know I still wanted to do that, but just not, because I had my anchors. So I guess I'd say to you, what are your anchors? What is it that is important to you in your world? It might be that it's your family. For me, it was my children. So could I leave my children with the unbearable pain and loss of mine not being present? Could I leave my children with the ultimate knowledge that I'd chosen not to be here with them? Could I manifest that in my conscience and in my being? And the answer was a definitive no. Because I know that suicide tricks you into believing that you are worthless and there is no meaning, and it would be better for everybody if you just weren't here, and everybody will get over it in the end, And unfortunately, because I'm a daughter of suicide, I can tell you that's the biggest myth. You literally leave the people who know you, forget love you, who know you, with an irredeemable hole in their life. And that's before we even get to friends. And then we get to family. And it's like a cancer that infects every part of the being. And it's there forever. And it's bleak. And we don't talk about that as survivors of suicide, because it's not nice to have to tell people who are suicidal about the unbelievable agony they cause, because it makes people feel guilty. But guilt isn't a bad thing if it motivates you to change. So arguably what I'm trying to say to you is, what are your anchors? And if you haven't got anchors, then you need them. And like I said, for me, anchors are doing good deeds for others because that makes me feel that I have meaning. It's not that I'm seeking it, it gives it me. So for you, it might be looking at what you can change about your meaning right now, as in what do I do with my life? How am I living my life? What can I do that I think gives myself some more anchors? And it might be something radical. It could be something incredibly radical. I say that to people. It could be going and working in Tanzania and building schools. It could be going and working for a charity and doing something insanely unique to what you are now. It could be just being creative artist, something I'll never achieve. You know, I'm never going to be that creative at art, but I see people do it. I see how it changes them. It could be doing what I'm talking about on a very simple level, which is going for a walk. I mean that. If there's a bit of advice I can give to all of you, it's like, get your asses outside. Walk for a minimum of an hour a day, 2 hours if you can manage it. Just walk without any other intention than to walk, and just see how it makes you feel. And then come back to me and tell me it didn't work. Come back to me and say, oh, it didn't lift my mood at all. And I will tell you, you need to walk more, because it's not going to happen. It only doesn't happen if you don't do it. So think about those things. And the most important part of when you feel suicidal is, I've said this ultimately throughout the last years that I've been doing this, the message isn't kill you. The message is kill your life, not the self within it. Fundamentally, we go through transitions and periods where we need to completely reinvent who we are, because we're not who we were. Like, I know that we take ourselves with us. I've still got my protective, hypersensitive, tick-ridden 5-year-old self. She's still with me. You know, I still tick. You know, they'll see myself on here, like, and sometimes I'll be doing this because that's my tics, my neurological tics. I can't do anything about it. And she is the one who manifested them when she was a child to cope with an incredibly insecure and anxious environment. And she's come with me all the way, but she doesn't drive my car anymore, you know, because she's 5 and she needs to be tucked away safely in bed. So, you know, I've put her in a very safe place. I'm not saying that she doesn't occasionally wake up and come and play havoc, usually if I've had a glass of wine. But the point is, she's usually safe, right? I'm a grown woman. I'm a mother. I'm multifaceted. I'm multidisciplined. I've got all of these things about me. I'm also chaos. I'm also sadness. I'm all these things. But I've reinvented and reinvented me. I'm doing that again because it's essential. Because if I don't, I'm stuck somewhere in the past. And I'm not, because every experience changes everything about who I am, a little bit or a lot. And very often we're trying to stay where we thought we were meant to be when the be has gone. And a lot of us are going through that. A lot of people listening to me now will be secondarily traumatized after a screwing, horrible 18 months. Like, disastrously disgusting emotional experience, and dealing with the ramifications of how society looks now. These are real things that many of us are going through. So know that and kind of accept that it's been depressing. Like, why aren't we just talking about that, man? Why haven't they got signs all over billboards going, man, it's been depressing. You're normal if you felt helpless, felt isolated, isn't it shit? Why haven't we got things like that everywhere? You are completely normal as a human if you have struggled in the last 18 months. That would be a really good advertising campaign. Smile! People like to see your face. It's a human instinct to show that you're not baring teeth and you're peaceful and you like people. That'd be helpful as well, wouldn't it? All of those things would be helpful. But as we haven't got a £55 billion advertising scheme to just scare us to death, and they haven't thought about doing one that would make us feel a little bit happier, then we need to start owning that ourselves, right? It's been hard, and we're all coping with the collateral damage, some of us more than others. But the point is, if you felt depressed 2 years ago, chances are you're going to feel as depressed today because stuff's been taken away from your control and you've been traumatized And some people have lost people in a range of circumstances, and life has felt static, so you've not had a lot of choices. And these are all completely against everything I've talked about tonight as far as what makes a healthy, happy human. So also normalize it's okay if it's felt shit. It means congratulations, you're a pretty well-adjusted human in really inhuman circumstances. And know that this isn't going to work for you, which is why you're going to do some of the things that I said. And it's why you come tonight. So it's always going to work out because we'll find a way forward. See you next week, guys. Much love. Those of you who like crime, join me on a Wednesday and a Sunday for my live chats on YouTube. That is just a way of getting more viewers, but it's also great because we all get to have an hour, and I do love it. See you soon. And for those of you coming to my shows, it's been great seeing you all. I'm really loving meeting people who actually watch me. It's like really funny because I know you all when you come. It's like really weird. I think I'm probably some kind of weird cyber story. It's like, oh, hi, I know your story. Take care, my lovelies. See you soon.